This is NFA Talk, the show that talks about guns and gun rights, keeping you up to date with what's currently going on, from the newest guns, promotions, and events, plus how we're lobbying for your rights.
Evening, everyone. My name is Nathaniel Milger. I'm the social media coordinator for Canada's National Firearms Association. With me tonight is Blair Hagan, our vice president and BC director, as well as Daniel Fritter from Caliber Magazine. This is going to be a really important one, very much directed to our BC membership and BC gun owners in general. But before we get started, I would just like to share our current promotional materials, and then we'll go from there.
The annual Big Freaking Gun giveaway, the Grey Guardian. With every $50 donation to Canada's National Firearms Association, you receive a chance to win this top-tier Cadex Defense R7 rifle, complete with loophole scope. Plus, this year we are including a Level 1 precision rifle course at legendary Canadian sniper Rob Furlong's Marksmanship Academy in beautiful Alberta. This 3-day course is taught by an excellent team of experienced veteran instructors that will hone your marksmanship skills to a whole new level and is an opportunity not to be missed. Get those donations in now for your chance to win. Our fall t-shirt campaign is in full swing. With the purchase of any t-shirt, you are entered to win a beautiful Beretta 1301 Tactical Marine 12-gauge shotgun. Promotion ends soon, so visit our online store and grab a shirt today.
All right, and on that note, we're watching things unfold in BC. We've got 10 days till the election is over, and I think I'm going to pass it off to you guys. I'm from Alberta. I was not aware of a lot of what was going on out there until only recently when the firearms issue started to come up and the absolute vitriol coming out of your province. I've got family in BC, a lot of family in BC. I lived in Vancouver for a while. I'm actually amazed at the support for the NDP and a lot of the rural communities in British Columbia. They seem to think it's the old Tommy Douglas party. How little do they realize that the multi-headed Hydra has become a shadow of its former self. So I will pass it off to you guys, whoever wants.
Yeah, it was very surprising because certainly we were wondering, running up to the election cycle, I mean, would firearms even be part of the issue in BC? Well, I guess we got our answer, and it started pretty early. And in a lot of ways it's disappointing, but in other ways it kind of makes sense, and it kind of mirrors the national scene. And Dan, I know you've been doing a lot of work on this and talking to a lot of people in BC, and you've got a very unique perspective on this.
Yeah, so for those that are perhaps not from BC and unfamiliar, we have in this pending election basically two large parties: the BC Conservatives, which is a new party that only started up a few months ago. Well, it didn't start up a few months ago, it's been around forever, but it has not had a large place in BC politics historically. It was the BC Liberals. Now, the BC Conservatives have sort of absorbed the BC Liberals somewhat ironically. The head of the Liberal Party, the BC Liberals, Kevin Falcon, basically folded a few weeks back and said that they weren't going to be supporting candidates and all this sort of thing. So we're left with the BC NDP, which is the provincial party representing the same NDP as Jagmeet Singh's federal party, because it is, for those that don't know, one party. There's only one NDP membership. You can't really be a provincial member, is my understanding. You're just a party member. When the Conservatives came out, they've been trying to kind of make a name for themselves, obviously distinguish themselves from the BC Liberals. Their leader, John Rustad, made a commitment to not support the Trudeau gun bans, very specifically not support the Trudeau gun bans with provincial policing resources. This is a similar claim to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, so it would make the West all actually aligned in this way. The NDP leader, David Eby, has taken that and embellished upon it hugely and has basically been campaigning for days now. And I mean, a major component of his campaign at this point, with multiple statements per day about how John Rustad would not have the RCMP or BC Police enforce federal gun laws, which is, like I said, a huge embellishment. That to go from, we're not going to use our resources to confiscate guns from lawful gun owners, which is what Rustad committed to saying, by not doing this, that there's going to be, gang members roaming the streets unchecked, was the exact word, with assault weapons. And it's blatantly false. It's entirely misleading. It is fear mongering to a degree that, before we started recording the podcast, I was saying we've seen politicians lie and mislead on the issue of guns in Canada. It's not that surprising. This is to a degree that is surprising. It's just blatant. It's offensive. It should offend gun owners because it is just outright. I mean, he's not drawing a distinction. He seems incapable, David Eby, of drawing a distinction between people with a PAL and gang members. He just considers us all about the same thing, and it's. I think it's very concerning.
I've been hearing that a lot from firearms owners and others in BC, people who believe in this right and freedom, and it's very misleading, and it's very offensive. But I think it preys on the general ignorance of firearms laws in BC and in Canada. David Eby would probably have you believe that, prior to the federal action on guns recently, everything was uncontrolled and anybody could walk into a store and walk out with anything. And it's preying on that type of ignorance. Now, I know there's less of that now, and a lot of people have educated themselves on this issue. But again, if there are people out there where this message might resonate, it's going to be based on ignorance rather than understanding the issue. These are the people who basically, when you say, well, do you know what the gun laws are now? They come back with, no, but I know they're not tough enough. It's that type of attitude that this type of thing attracts. And as far as this really, casting John Rustad as somebody irresponsible, somebody who would put illegal firearms in the hands of gangsters and criminals, I think it's really counterintuitive, because anybody who is voting for the BC Conservative Party understands their policies on crime and crime and punishment, and knows that that's not the case. So as far as changing votes in this election, I can't really see Eby's claims on this really doing that, but it does prey on ignorance, and it basically satisfies the ideological needs of people who have a certain attitude towards firearms and want to see it expressed in a political way.
Okay, so Blair, before we keep going here, just quickly, we're in the first 10 minutes, so I know that we get a lot of individuals now that are freedom followers. They're not firearms owners. They want to be firearms owners at some point. Let's simplify this for everyone right off the bat. So May 2020, the OIC, Justin Trudeau bans 1,500 types of guns, all semi-automatics. There's no automatics. There's nothing there that's insane or crazy or scary, like they said. A lot of antiques are banned. Now handguns are effectively banned. We get to keep them till we die or they get taken from us. And that's anything. That's we're dealing with little old ladies, and their great grandpa's 1917 Webley is getting taken, and they're writing it down as well. Hold on. So that's what we're dealing with right now, and that's the end of it all. And they're saying in November that they're going to start with the businesses. They're going to start taking these firearms that are by no means anything absolutely crazy in any way, shape, or form. It has all been really just blown completely out of proportion as a scapegoating issues. Now you have this guy coming out of BC saying that gangsters, this is literally what he's saying, gangsters are going to be able to go to their corner store and American style buy assault rifles and carry them around with them. They're going to be able to buy handguns again, and like they weren't able to before. Like, this is just so insane. And I think it all is coming from White Rock, where you had the guy running and shooting the fully automatic that came from God knows where. You could never own that in Canada to begin with. And I've seen the NDP post that, and then it's almost like they're bad actors post that video directly underneath of it to push and scare people. So it's really disingenuous. It's really quite gross. It's quite nasty. It's the bottom of the barrel politically.
Literally based on ignorance and lies.
Yeah.
And I think that when you say like they're almost bad actors, I think that you can remove the almost there, because the other component to this is that the obviously David Eby is kind of at the forefront of this as the leader of that party. He's out there making these claims and these statements repeatedly, standing behind podiums with scary looking posters and all that kind of thing. He's also a member of he's a lawyer by trade, and he's a former attorney general for this province. So He is intimately familiar with the existence of the Firearms Act, what it does and does not allow. He knows that when he sees that video of a machine gun being shot in a driveway in White Rock, that is a prohibited firearm. It's a machine gun. You can't have that. There's no license you can get for it realistically. He knows these things. He knows them incredibly well because he's also a former head of the BC Civil Liberties Union. So this guy he's been around this stuff and these laws for his entire professional career. So to see him now lying so blatantly about it from the perspective of, and I think Blair's right, it's not going to shift a lot of votes, but what it is from the NDP side is it's a positioning move. They've been trying to make John Rustad appear farther and farther right on the political spectrum. He has made it relatively easy, unfortunately, in some cases, but in this one, this isn't a very right-wing thing to say, hey, we don't want to spend valuable police budget, which we don't have a ton of, gathering guns from lawful, legally owned people. And it's really, like, I think that's the added layer to watch this as a British Columbian who has kind of seen David Eby in the headlines for decades now. And no, there is absolutely no chance this is ignorance or he doesn't understand it. Like, he knows it, and he's choosing to lie because he wants to scare British Columbians into thinking that John Rustad is the alt-right oogie boogie man. And that's why I've been trying so hard to get the messaging out to gun owners, because there is almost 400,000 gun owners in this province. There are likely going to be about 2 million votes cast in the next election. Gives us about a 20% number of ballots we can get out there. So the one thing that I'm hoping the NDP hasn't banked on is, well, this might be a really effective move to position John Rustad for the right. It's not going to get people off the couch on election day. Gun rights and gun control is typically on exit polling. It never ranks as a top 10 issue for why people went and cast their ballot. But for gun owners, it absolutely is. So we need this to get out there. And if you own guns and you're listening to this, or you've gone to the gun range with your friends, you need to talk to your friends about this and say, look, the NDP is absolutely lying through their teeth about us, our community, our industry, our hobby, our recreation, our pastime, all for a little bit of political gain. And I think it's very concerning because we've already seen politicians use guns for political gain, obviously in Ottawa. And I think that those same politicians in Ottawa are probably watching this situation unfold very closely. And whatever happens out of this will inform the next federal election, I think, from both the NDP or the Liberals. If they see this as a successful campaign, they're going to keep doubling down on this stuff. So if you're a gun owner in BC, you're going to need to get off the couch and vote, but you also need to talk to everyone else about this, because I don't think people truly grasp how underhanded and dirty this is, given the people involved. It actually kind of really frustrates me.
Well, let's get everybody bad here. Let's hear the man himself. Here's the first one. Here's the radio. I've clipped it so it's short, but here's the radio debate.
Other people who are too dangerous to be in the community, they need to be in custody. But where you will find some disagreement with me, and where he faced a serious credibility problem, was his response to a journalist question last week about gun control. The journalist said, are you going to make sure that British Columbia enforces federal gun rules restricting handguns and semi-automatic rifles? And John said, no. I'm going to direct police not to put any resources into enforcing federal gun control rules. Well, that doesn't make our community safe. It has nothing to do with hunting. It is all about pandering to a small constituency, which is so small, I think is invisible, in order to, and it makes our communities less safe.
Okay, John Rustad,
what do you say to people in Surrey or in Richmond about semi-automatic guns and handguns, and directing the police not to enforce those rules?
You want to talk about gun control?
Yes, I do.
Here's a big issue. David Eby is refusing to even put any police efforts towards actually stopping illegal guns from coming into this province through our ports. We propose to put out a police force that is going to be focused on the potential criminal activities that are happening in our ports. And their response was, that's federal. That's a federal issue. We're not going to worry about that. I'm sorry, that's a provincial issue. When these guns and drugs and organized crime is happening in our streets and happening in these communities, we need to do everything we can to lock down on that, which is why we would put a force in place to deal with it.
To the point that he made to you, though, would you enforce federal gun restrictions?
So, look, there are law-abiding gun owners in this province that are being targeted for by the federal government, and I disagree with that. And so I will not see our precious dollars that are being spent on law enforcement going after law-abiding guns. Instead, I will have them going after the criminals, going after the gangs, going after the source of these guns coming into our province.
I just find it astonishing that someone who says that public safety is a priority would take that vital tool away from police to enforce federal gun regulations against gangsters in our province. Police are lining up to say it's an absurd proposal.
He wants to go after
handguns, John. Are you hunting deer with handguns? With semi-automatic rifles? This isn't about hunting.
We want to go after criminals and crime, which is what, quite frankly, the guy who wrote the book on how to sue the police doesn't want to do it.
Just for the listeners, so you don't talk over each other, just finish your thought, please.
Police are lining up to say it is absurd that you would take that tool away from them that they use to enforce the law against gangsters or trafficking guns.
So look, we have a premier who actually wrote the book entitled How to Sue the Police. You cannot take his advice on how to tackle crime. We're going to go after the gangs. We're going to go after the guns. We're going to go after the source. We're going to make sure that our ports are no longer sieves for this stuff coming into British Columbia.
Despite all announcements to the contrary, John.
Thank you, leaders. We fit in one final...
It's like incredibly bizarre, and bizarre in a way that compromises safety. To say you're not going to enforce federal handgun rules because actually I struggle to know why. And so, you know, it makes our communities less safe in terms of a crime and public safety.
Oh,
what a fool.
Yeah.
What a fool.
So small and insignificant, over 6% of BC's population, and they're small and don't matter. So
police are lining up in support of this?
No, police are lining up not in support of this. It's only the police unions that are lining up in support of this, and they're, you know, not necessarily frontline police officers. So tear it apart, guys. Everything there that he said, that's wrong. Go for it.
Well, here it starts.
Where do you begin?
Where do you begin? You begin with, this is private property, lawfully acquired, lawfully owned, private property possessed by people who are authorized to have it. So it has nothing to do with gangsters. It has nothing to do with criminal gangs. It has nothing to do with anything that he actually said in that interview. And for him to sit there and so glibly, you know, rattle off little lines about, hey, you know, the police want this and it's going to affect crime. No, you're attacking law-abiding people, and that's offensive. Okay, these are not people who committed crimes or possessing this stuff illegally. These are the people who bent over backwards to continue to lawfully own and possess their property. And I think John Rustad did bring that out into the conversation. But the fact of the matter is, it's basically ignored by politicians like Eby and maybe people, you know, generally who don't really understand how gun laws work in this country. The guns that were targeted were all legally owned. Okay, they were not criminal. They were not the guns that are being smuggled into this country. They were not the guns that are possessed by gangs. Every single one of those guns is a legal gun owned by somebody who acquired it lawfully and owned it according to the Firearms Act and the Criminal Code of Canada. How does that stop crime? It doesn't.
Well, and I think what also, like, even if I take my, you know, gun guy hat off and just think about it kind of pragmatically as a resident of BC, we have seen a lot of crime come up in recent years. We have a lot of addiction issues in this province. We have, you know, something resembling a healthcare crisis coming up. We have a lot of issues, and a lot of them are traced back to, you know, seemingly a lack of resources. So, I mean, when Eby says like, oh, you know, he's going to do this and it's going to let gangsters have guns, it's the polar opposite is actually the case, because for every police officer who has to be tasked with going out and dealing with this confiscation BS, that's one less police officer to do the job of policing criminal populations. I'll never forget that, like, I bumped into a firearms officer, RCMP guy that works with NWest at one of the gun shops in Vancouver a long time ago. And we were talking about his job and whatnot. And he said, yeah, I really like it because when I come and do these inspections at businesses, I don't have to worry about a gun at all. Because he doesn't even carry one because everyone around him is not a criminal. And I think, you know, that's what it's just so frustrating, because I mean, it is counterproductive. This whole ban has been counterproductive already. We've seen millions of dollars get wasted federally. As it continues to progress towards some sort of resolution, it's going to continue to burn through even more money. And from a provincial perspective, like, you know, what David Eby is doing is obviously for political gain, and he's trying to do it, like I said, positioning. But as for not just gun owners, what he is proposing and how he is proposing it is harmful to all British Columbians, because it represents a reduction in safety. We don't have I mean, I live in Kelowna. Kelowna is chronically understaffed when it comes to our police. They say that somewhere between 20 and 30%, like we need 20 to 30% more police officers to meet the minimum standard of policing, not to get to a great level, just the minimum standard. I don't want to see our police officers wasting time. Like it's asinine. And like I said, watching Eby in that clip, it makes my blood boil a bit, because you're watching a lawyer, an attorney general. Like, the guy was in charge of our judicial system in BC for a long time. He understands the laws. When he's saying, handgun rules, he's being intentionally vague. He's trying to use the most vague terminology possible, because it's still technically correct, I suppose, on some level, that is a federal handgun law. But it's so vague and it's so obfuscating. It's brutal. It's like watching Justin Trudeau on May 1st, 2020 all over again, except he's doing it day after day after day on every single social media network he can find.
Dan, he's the epitome of everything that's gone wrong in the last 10 years. He really, truly is. I was not very familiar with him until the last couple of weeks, and I am just watching this guy. It's like, who is this man? This is insane.
There are still people who will defend the old long gun registry. Billions of dollars wasted. Well, no, it was all for public safety and it was just starting to work. Some people have an ideological commitment to that. And David Eby is one of those people, okay? I mean, yes, he probably understands how gun control works in this country, but the fact of the matter is those who choose to be compliant with those laws don't matter to him. He holds us in contempt. Okay, and there's just no other way to look at it. Well, yes, I know you tried to do this legally, but times change, things change, and we have to take these things away from you now. Yes, thank you for being a responsible gun owner, but I'm sorry, we have to do it. And it's that type of attitude that, I mean, if it's allowed to propagate in our political system, yes, the guns will be gone. I mean, we have lost guns in the past. We are losing guns now, and if this federal initiative comes to its ultimate fruition, the majority of guns in this country will be gone, and there will be very few people authorized to continue to own them. So you have, again, I mean, I say this a lot, you have to stand up for your rights and freedoms and get offended by this and fight back. And if you're a voter in British Columbia who has traditionally voted for the NDP because that's your party, or the union tells you to vote for that party, you better do some soul searching here, because you can't ignore this. If you're watching this, you know what the gun laws are, okay? And you know what's going on with David Eby and his party. So you better stand up. You better take a stand. Your family better take a stand. Your friends better take a stand. Educate them the way we've done for many, many years, very successfully in this country. I mean, we've had firearms law reform laws. We've made political change, and we can continue to make political change. But again, I mean, don't put this issue on the back burner in favor of some other issues that you may look at more favorably.
No, because like I said too earlier, this is going to precipitate the federal response. If the Liberals and the NDP in Ottawa see this as being a successful positioning play, and it does benefit the BC NDP to do so, then the Liberals and the federal NDP will probably likely try and do something similar. And I think that if you're one of those gun owners who's watching this and going, well, I don't think that'll be the case, or, we often sometimes come across the ones that go, I don't have a handgun or a semi-automatic. I'm not impacted. Those guns are dangerous. I have a pump action shotgun for goose and stuff or whatever. I think those people should watch that clip again and see how easily David Eby conflates gun owners, just like you, who might have a different shape gun, but they're gun owners just like you, how easily he conflates us with gang members. There's no distinction. So if you think that your different kind of gun is going to create that distinction for them, you are sorely mistaken, because there isn't even an ounce of hesitation in anything he has been saying that shows any kind of respect for the legal process we've gone through to own guns. So I don't think it's going to matter. You're going to have to do something, because it's true. If they start with these, once upon a time, no one thought the Ruger ranch rifle was going to be a prohibited firearm. And yet here we are. That's a 50, 60-year-old semi-automatic 223 ranch gun,
And so is an AR-15.
Yeah.
It's a 60-year-old semi-automatic rifle.
And if this is allowed to occur, if we continue to allow politicians to push us around on this particular file so thoroughly, in 10 more years, it will be the pump action 12 gauges and stuff that they're coming after because they don't like any guns, and it continues to work for them. And that's why, I keep saying there are a lot of gun owners in BC. This is one of those situations where we actually can have a very large impact on this election. This election is shaping up to be quite close so far. Most of the polls have the NDP and the Conservatives within a few percent of one another. And like I said, when we have a 1.8 million people casting ballots and you have a population of 377,000 licensed gun owners, 170,000 or so have restricted guns. That's a big chunk. That's Kelowna. The restricted handguns or restricted licenses in BC is a larger population than Kelowna, which is one of the larger metro centers in the entire province. Taken totally, the amount of gun owners in BC would represent the second largest municipality. And you'd never see David Eby just go out there and be like, well, everyone in Victoria sucks. You're all gang members. So, I think gun owners should really take this stuff seriously. And like Blair said, get angry, get active. Start talking to your friends, start talking to your gun club. If you belong to a gun club, you should email them and say, hey, I'm a member. Why haven't I heard about this from you guys? I know a lot of gun clubs don't want to take partisan stances because they want to represent all of their members and their various political things. But here's the thing, if we lose these guns, your gun club will close. Like, gun clubs are already hemorrhaging membership because restricted firearms ownership is a shrinking pool at this point. You can't get a handgun or an AR-15, which is why most people got club memberships in the first place. That David Eby is so willing to use our resources, use your tax dollars to go after your property. I think that gives gun clubs a license to reach out to members and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to tell you how to vote, but you need to know this is happening.
We've seen this so often before in places like, UK, Australia, New Zealand. Okay. And once they're gone, they're gone. It's over.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get them back. Well, New Zealand, it might be a little bit of a different case because they've had a very major change in government and they did not manage to confiscate all of the guns. So it may change there. But, in those other places, no. And the community is diminished by that. It's diminished politically, where it's not an issue there the same way it is in places like Canada and the United States. So again, I mean, it's outrageous. It's offensive in the extreme. And I think it's incumbent upon everybody who believes in rights and freedoms to stand up and send them a message.
So shout out to Mark Hall from Blood Origins Canada. The moment that David Eby made those comments there, he sent us a quick video that we shared on all of our stories on social media where he was like, I'm on my way to go duck hunting with my semi-automatic shotgun. And he did immediately that morning did a video saying like, this is my apparently gangster gun, right? And we posted it everywhere. So getting back on track here, as I said before, he not only doubled down, he quadrupled down. He seems to think that he got traction, and he released this, which is pretty wild, all over their social media. Assault weapons. He's a risk we can't afford. People are dying. They're starving to death, and they're dying of drug overdoses in the streets. But letting us keep our semi-automatics, not fully automatic, semi-automatics, is apparently a risk that they just can't afford. So talking about activism and talking about Mark Hall, Daniel Fritter, you put together a pretty good article on your website there. We sent it out with our e-blast here today to all of our members, and it was about the NDP petition that was released. So this is pretty wild. It's obviously a ploy to get more signatures and names and email addresses so they can spam you, but stop John Rustad from letting gangs carry assault rifles. So what do you say about that?
It's the gun in the top corner with the supposed to be blood on it that really kind of just is like,
I didn't even notice
Jesus,
that.
come on, people.
I guess so.
It's, again, going back to what Rustad's claim was, that he just doesn't want to spend the money taking guns from people who have not committed a crime.
Yeah.
To that is just like, I don't want to swear, but holy, what? Like, this is absolutely effed. Like, this is frigged up. Like, it's just every time you can't go. I'm almost stammering here because I don't even know where to start, but like, you can't go to a hospital in this province and unless you've got a limb missing and you're hemorrhaging blood all over the floor, you will wait in the ER for hours. Like, hours and hours. Like, and yet this is what we want to spend our money on. I think it's somewhat ironic that like the balls on the NDP to say we can't afford John Rustad. We can't afford this. We can't afford what David Eby is committing to. We have far greater issues that we really need to be spending our tax dollars on. And again, that's where it's, I think I know that this issue, I hope it resounds amongst gun owners and that BC's 377,000 gun owners all go out and vote, because that would actually change the outcome of the election very, very strongly, I think. But I wish that like normal people would get pissed off about this, because I think if you could explain, there are always going to be some stalwarts who just hate guns and they never like them. But for a lot of people that are in the middle of the road, those centrist people, I mean, how else can you view this other than a giant colossal waste of money? And then to watch someone who knows everything about this intimately leveraging it so crassly, like they're photoshopping fake blood on a handgun in a fundraiser to make people feel more afraid. And I think as a gun owner, it should piss you off, because I mean, they're trying to make your neighbors afraid of you. When they conflate gun ownership with gangsters, what do you think the next time you tell someone, oh, I'm going to the gun range, and you always have a little bit of that trepidation about how they're going to respond. This is the exact kind of stuff that nets you a negative response. And it's vilifying. It pisses me off. Like I wish that we could sue them or something, because it's BS.
And rightfully so. But I think the case is a lot of normal people, and I would say most people in British Columbia who actually understand gun laws in this country would agree. Okay, so I don't think you're probably right. There are probably people out there who are concerned about issues of criminal violence and don't understand the gun laws and who may be affected by this. But I don't think they're the majority of people in this province. And I think there's enough recognition of the failure of gun laws in the past, especially the federal governments, that look, you're targeting the wrong people. And we've seen this come up time and time again whenever it becomes a media issue. And I don't see a lot of people being swayed by this. Again, it's an issue to take the spotlight off David Eby's many failures as premier. Okay, if we're talking about this, we're not talking about the economy. We're not talking about real issues of crime in the streets. We're not talking about issues of affordability, rent. No.
That's what John Rustad said after the debate last night too. He's like, I watched David Eby debate David Eby up here, try and defend his own record and say, let me keep doing what I'm doing, even though it's all terrible. So let's keep going with this. Let's keep getting people mad, because I think people need to know exactly everything he's saying. So let's see.
You're making me mad.
Yeah, this illegitimate love child of Margaret Trudeau and Shaggy from Scooby-Doo had to say at this other press conference here. This was sent to us by a member.
Rifles have no place on the streets of British Columbia. And I will ensure that police not only are able to use resources to enforce the gun laws, but have all of the resources they need to be able to chase down and address gangsters who would traffic in firearms and have restricted weapons. The idea that John Rustad has put forward and defended again yesterday in our debate, when I asked him directly about it, that he would tell law enforcement they are not allowed to spend money to enforce those gun rules, is dangerous. And you can talk to Baltej Dillon behind me, a decorated RCMP officer, former RCMP officer, and he will tell you what that means for police officers in our street to lose that tool of enforcement when it comes to organized crime and gangsters. It's dangerous.
So that is a lie, a tool of enforcement. No, this is confiscation orders. This is confiscation orders coming from Ottawa. This is not a tool for enforcement. I would say that's a lie. Wouldn't you guys agree on that? Because that's all it is pushing to be able to confiscate. That's what this is. It's not a tool. It's not any sort of tool.
Core of the issue. This is confiscation of lawfully owned, lawfully acquired property. And that didn't even enter the conversation here. Didn't address it.
I mean, if anything, it's a burden to law enforcement.
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
tasking them with another thing that is not. It's nothing to do with criminality. It's stupid, and it's an absolute lie. And I'm really tired of watching ex-police officers, like be it that fella or Bill Blair, mislead on this stuff. Because I mean, I don't know a single police officer. I know quite a few who are still serving with police. I don't know a single one that supports any of this
look,
stuff.
And here's the issue: it brings law enforcement, and it brings the laws of Canada into disrepute, and that's been going on for many years in this country when it comes to gun laws. Okay, the gun laws are so crazy and out in left field that the people who are subject to them, the people who have to understand them, obey them, operate within them, look at them and go, "This is crazy. I cannot justify my compliance with this." Because I'm not a criminal. What I do is not endangering anyone's public safety. Yet every single step of the way, I am being treated like a criminal, and I'm being set up for confiscation or losing my right to do this. And it's just wrong, and it's got to stop now. And certainly we have a federal party, the Conservative Party of Canada, who believes this now. And it looks like Mr. Rustad and the BC Conservative Party do as well.
Going back to the cops thing, I'm Alberta, so forgive me here, but he wanted to defund the police, liberal, super leftist people during the whole thing. He was a defund the policer, and
he's literally written a book called How to Sue the Police. Like that's not hyperbole. Wow. It's an actual book you can buy, written by him and one other author, because back when he was the head of the BC Civil Liberties Union, he was Mr. Anti-Police. The guy, I mean, up until he entered politics, and I'll note for everyone else's listeners, we didn't elect this guy. We've never elected him. John Horgan was our former premier. He was elected. Mr. Eby then inherited the role when Horgan retired. So he's kind of, he's an unelected guy. But prior to this part of his career, I don't think he'd ever met a police officer he liked.
Well, and now I'll just throw this out there. Do we have to go out and buy this book now?
I mean, I'm sure he'd find.
Is that where we're at? In this province. I mean, geez.
I mean, I don't want to counsel anyone to break the law, especially when it comes to intellectual property, because I have a lot of copyright stuff. But maybe that's a book you download, something like that. Because I mean, I'm not a really big fan of putting money in David Eby's pocket any more than I have to.
Too funny. Well, and he's really hitching himself to the liberal bandwagon here. I mean, he's Justin Trudeau's the most loathed prime minister in Canadian history, and this guy is just following in his footsteps. So BC's got to be able to see that. He's not even following Jagmeet Singh's. Jagmeet Singh's not saying a whole hell of a lot about a lot of this stuff.
I don't really understand. I mean, I understand the positioning argument, and they must have internal polling or some sort of indication that by positioning John Rustad, that's some sort of path to victory is going to be accomplished by painting him as further right and doing everything they can to do so. But I got to say, there's a couple things that will make this interesting. One is, like I said, that, with the amount of ballots typically cast in a BC election, gun owners constitute like a significant amount of people by percentage, especially in a very tight election like this. And the second is that for people that aren't here, I guess, I don't know if it's the same in other provinces, but the way gun ownership breaks down in the province it does not follow the conventional rural urban divide people might expect. Semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s and handguns that have been obviously most impacted in BC generally reside in urban areas because we don't have a lot of population density outside of the urban areas. So for example, even here in Kelowna, there was a period of time where you couldn't even get an SKS off the shelf because the gun stores didn't really stock them a lot. They sold bolt action rifles, lever action rifles, really conventional hunting stuff, old surplus, you name it. But I mean, there's not a vibrant amount of those guns out there in rural settings. So areas like Surrey, areas like Abbotsford, areas like Mission, those are areas that I think the NDP are vying for, but I don't think they've got adequate data that this could be something that hurts them, and it should be, because a lot of these people that are directly impacted are going to be in areas that they don't expect them to be. And I think that's where it's, like I keep saying, it's really important that gun owners send a message this time at the ballot box. Show up. Like we actually could change this, guys. Like this is not, the federal election where we have 2 million people and we hope some of them vote, but the election's got 8 million people voting. Like it's, this is a small election with a lot of people that own guns. BC has the second highest populate percentage, I think it is, of gun owners. Like we're behind Alberta in terms of density for firearms. We're also I think we have the most restricted licenses as a proportion of license holders. It's almost 50-50 split. So I think it's, if there's anywhere that this has got to, bite back, it should be here.
Let's throw another video. Let's just keep it rolling. Let's just keep it rolling. And there's a couple of things here in this one, and I want the viewers to keep an eye out on the top right of it because of the little picture of Rustad with the confiscated firearms that they have. It's this is some pretty wild Jay Goebbels style propaganda we got going on here. It's pretty phenomenal.
Why would we ever make it harder for those families, for those police officers to do their job, to respond to calls, make it more dangerous? It is unfathomable to me that anyone who would seek to run to be the leader of the province of British Columbia would direct the police not to enforce federal laws designed to go after gangsters, criminals, people who beat up family members. I can't understand it, and I don't stand for it. About how we can design better ways to go after gangsters, to interrupt the trafficking of guns, to make our communities even safer. That's something that I'm really looking forward to. I'm keen to do because we have to do even more. The idea that we would go backwards and pull tools away from police designed to keep us all safer is bizarre. I don't want, nobody wants, except for apparently John Rustad, to import lax, US-style handgun and semi-automatic gun rules that make us all less safe. We don't want that gun violence in British Columbia.
Okay, so a couple of things. First thing off, this was sent to me from somebody on Twitter, and I don't know who filmed that, but the next thing that comes to mind is he keeps saying semi-automatics, and it's like, if there's anybody out there that's First Nations, I mean, that's what you guys use is SKSs. That's what all of my First Nations friends use, Indigenous people, they use SKSs. It's coming for your SKSs, guys. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And another thing too, I mean, I've never beat up a family member, but apparently that goes hand in hand with having a pal. So and stop illegal guns on his podium there. This is only going after illegal guns. Somebody should go wipe that out for you, buddy, because it's completely incorrect.
Yeah, and we've been through this with Bill C-21 and the amendments to C-21, where it became very clear that the federal government wanted to go after more than what some people would consider to be the prototypical, semi-automatic assault weapon type firearm. Okay, no. This goes much farther, and it goes after for firearms that are commonly owned and used in British Columbia. End of story. Okay, so let's not confuse the issue the way David Eby wants to do in this election. I think gun owners, and I don't think this old canard really operates in our community anymore. Well, I all I've got is a duck gun, and they'll never come after that. Well, guess what? When they tried to make you register that gun, and we all know what registration leads to. Everybody knows. I mean, certainly anybody who holds a registration or held a registration or wherever we're at for an AR-15. If they know where it is, if it's registered, they know where to come to pick it up. Okay. And some people dodge that with the failure of the long gun registry, but guess what? They will try and bring it back. And it shows you the attitude. It's one at a time, one step at a time. And again, we've seen this in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, any law or regulation that you can get in. And don't forget, when the May 2020 OIC was imposed, the RCMP sent out letters to everyone who owned one of these firearms and registered it back in the old long gun registry. So if you held a registration for something like a Mini 14 or something prior to 2012, you got that letter. We have information that you own this firearm prior to 2012. If so, it has been prohibited. You will receive instructions on what to do with it. It is so disingenuous. It's so offensive, but they don't care. And for British Columbians to stand up and show that we care and we have long memories and that we're going to do something about it.
When he said US style gun rules, and I saw Daniel, I saw you close your eyes for a moment and put your head back like, what do you have to say about that? Because obviously there was something going on in your head there.
That whole thing, like I was just sitting there going, man, I don't like that guy. But like from beginning to end, it's hard to know where to begin, because the guy opens his press conference by saying, "Well, I don't know why anyone would want to make the job of the police more difficult," says the guy who wrote the book on how to make the police's job more difficult. Like that no one in the media attending these events goes like, hey, wait a minute. This book that you wrote, do you understand this? Like, is this a different David Eby? Like, what the, like, yeah, it's so right at the beginning, you just go, there's no credibility here whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then he blows whatever attempt at credibility he might have completely away with the comments that follow, because like you said, it's everything. It's the fear-mongering photo of John Rustad and the seized guns in the background.
Yeah.
It's the egregious banner of "Stop Illegal Guns," when that's not the conversation that anyone is actually having. It's the needlessly emotive comments about, "Oh, I wouldn't want to make these police jobs more difficult." Nope, not anymore anyways. Everything about it is just like, it's over the top fear mongering that, like, I kind of can't believe it's still happening, because as someone who, like, as I've said in the past, I kind of consider myself media first, gun guy second. I don't know why. I mean, it says something about the state of media in this country and the lack of funding that they've got, because journalists should be going up one side of this guy and down the other for these claims, instead of pitching softballs about, so how bad is John Rustad on guns? Like, it's just, someone has to stand up. And I mean, I hope someone in the press corps does. I've been trying to figure out how to get to one of these events or call into one so that I can ask that question. But in the modern world where traction, why I think we've seen the NDP do this so much is they've gotten a ton of engagement on it. It's been mostly negative, but compared to a lot of their other comments, going off of social media posts, the views are way higher for the gun stuff, because there are so many people going, this is wrong. And that's what social media algorithms look for, is they look for discussion. The more discussion, the more back and forth, the more those messages get shown to other people. So I think the NDP is just looking at viewership numbers and going, this is really great. They're not really considering what the actual comments and replies are. But I'm really hoping that if I can't, or someone else in the media can't, start asking these questions of David Eby, why he's conflating these populations of gang members and gun owners, no matter what, gun owners and people that have some degree of respect for our tax dollars and where they should be going. I hope we send a message to David Eby in 10 days, because like, this is just, I can't believe that that's the premier of my province. The incumbent guy trying to win again is someone who, from the beginning of his statement, lies about wanting to help police, lies about everything. He's just, the whole thing is one nonstop continuous lie about guns. And it's, I can't, it's just kind of shocking, like, to watch it and just be like, this has been going on for days. And like, it's, I don't know, it does kind of, it to some degree, it shatters your faith in our social construct, that you can watch someone at that level, trying to get the most important job in the province, lie completely for days and days and days.
Well, speaking as somebody who's been at this for a while, undermining your faith in the social construct, I sort of remember, being in the same position about 25, 30 years ago, where it's sort of like, well, Canadians are fair. We live in a fair, just society that respects rights and freedoms and property and that sort of thing. And then the federal government brought in legislation that just completely shattered that. And all of a sudden, we're in a new political reality now. So this has been going on for a while, both at federal and provincial levels. But you mentioned the mainstream media, and I think they have a vested interest in, and I think there are a lot of people in mainstream media who have an ideological commitment to civil disarmament, and so they have a vested interest in trying to drive this as an issue. And plus, I don't think they care about trying to find the truth on this. As long as they're getting those hits, as long as they're getting those views on that, that's good enough. They may not believe that they're negative. They think, hey, we've really hit on something here, and people are waking up to the scourge of guns, or something like that, which I think you would agree is not the case. But this is why they drive the issue. They have no interest in the truth. They just have an interest in creating a media event around this issue, which really, it had no place in this campaign. At the beginning, when we were in the run up to this, I thought, well, are guns going to be a part of the campaign in BC? Well, why would they be? Everybody knows where the crime guns come from, right? But boom, almost immediately there it was. And I think because the campaign is so close, the polls are close. I think it's an act of desperation on their part to a large degree to take the emphasis off the many failures of this government. And I know that's we're here talking about guns, but it's a larger issue in BC because I think people are seeing the effects of failed policies nationally, but we really feel it here in BC. The cost of living here is just it's out of sight. People cannot afford a decent standard of living. And it's getting worse every day, and can be directly attributed to this government. I hate to say it. I don't want to get political that way here now. I want to talk about the firearms issue, but it ties in, okay? Because why would they bring it now? Why would they bring it up now? Because they needed it to take the emphasis off the failures of the government. And if they can drive this any way they can, and a lot of it is going to be negative from people who understand the issue, know what the laws of Canada regarding firearms are, and gun owners themselves, that doesn't matter. It's an issue. And we're not talking about the other more important issues that affect British Columbians.
John Rustad doesn't even mention it anymore. Like, he doesn't even respond. I mean, he was attacked last night on the debate over it, and he didn't even respond. I think that he knows it's a non-starter, but David Eby, like, to your point, Daniel, I mean, he's getting so many hits. There's how many comments? Like 1,000 comments, and 800 of them are negative, and then a couple of them are ads for sunglasses. Or a whole hell of a lot on there. Another thing, too, is he doesn't mention her by name, but he goes after Alberta and Danielle Smith pretty hard, as though she's the Wicked Witch of the West, and she's my Wicked Witch of the West. Danielle, go out there and arm wrestle him for us, would you? Because he needs to be taken down a notch. So I get another 30-second clip here just to finish it all off. This is what he said in the debate last night. Enjoy.
And now John Rustad has actually announced that he's not even going to enforce federal gun laws in British Columbia. He's going to direct the police, and this isn't just one time or twice, it's 3 times, including in the radio debate we participated in. He will direct the police not to enforce federal gun laws that prevent abusers from accessing guns, that prevent gangsters from buying and selling handguns and semi-automatic weapons. It's ridiculous. And now he says he's going to get tough on crime. Give me a break. John, you have to go with the gangsters. You have to take their cars and their houses and their guns and enforce the law, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, so he's still going, and John Rustad didn't even really respond to that. He just kind of, as you guys probably saw,
well, you know what? It makes sense now, because when you're the biggest drug dealer in the province, you hate competition. So,
well, people too, maybe they don't understand, but like when Rustad was referring to the ports issues, like BC has some of the busiest ports, in Canada, obviously, because we're on the West Coast where a bunch of our stuff comes from China overseas. So Port of Vancouver it sees thousands and thousands and thousands of containers every month, probably. And there is basically no law enforcement there. We need to be spending money on X-ray scanners so that we can scan containers for contraband. Like, we don't need to be talking about why taking my gun away apparently stops gangsters. Like, that's just a complete waste of time.
I didn't even think about this until you just mentioned this. When I was a young man trying to make it out in Vancouver in 2007, 2008, I actually worked out there unloading cargo containers from ships for clothing companies. It was just kind of a quick job. It was easy. You just show up in your work boots and you haul stuff off. And yeah, it went right on the trucks. I didn't even think about that. That's right from China and onto the trucks, man. I didn't see a single cop out there. Now that you mentioned that, that's why I didn't think about that.
BC has had and this is kind of not super firearm centric, but it kind of relates, is that BC has had for a very long time a massive issue with smuggled things, because our border to the States is like, there's a road called Zero Avenue. On the other side of it is Roosevelt Way, I think it's called, in Washington State. They are about 10 feet apart. You can crash a car from Zero Ave into Washington State. Someone's actually done it and made for a big issue around insurance, because they were alive when they left Canada. Yeah, so it's very close, and there's no, like, if you drive down there, the border guards will drive past, but there's nothing stopping people from throwing things across it. I mean, to put it in perspective, it's so poorly policed. There was a motel, an inn that you could stay at in Washington State called the Smuggler's Inn. Every room had a pair of night vision goggles in it because you were supposed to stay there and watch people run across their lawn smuggling things from BC to Washington State. I believe, proprietor of that building has since actually gone to jail for, guess what, smuggling. It's that much of a, like, this is a joke of a border. So we've got a porous border there, and then our ports, which have huge amounts of traffic, are basically unpoliced. So when we've seen the national issues around money laundering, a lot of that is rooted around Vancouver's casino scene. When we've had issues with fentanyl, a lot of that was the precursor chemicals were coming in from Port of Vancouver. BC is kind of the mecca for a lot of this stuff. And when it comes to organized crime, this is one of the things that's frustrating about the gun issue, is that, the same people that are smuggling in fentanyl and laundering money in BC are also the same people that are buying illegal guns from the States because of our incredibly porous border. So we have this confluence of factors that law enforcement could use more tools to certainly interdict some of this stuff. And instead we get David Eby, pounding the drum of, domestic abusers are going to get to jail because some guy's gun was seized. It's stupid.
All of that is true, but you're missing one thing. Why are illegal guns being imported into BC? Why are they being imported into Canada? Because there is a demand for it.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's an ever increasing demand. And if they can't get them in Canada, obviously they will smuggle them in. Now, why is there a demand? I mean, we see it here in BC, in Vancouver, the gang violence involving firearms. I mean, that horrific incident in White Rock, which you never used to see in BC. Okay. Why? Because they know they can get away with it. The sentencing, the penalties for the use of a firearm and a violent crime are so they're just a joke now. You're not going to jail. Use a firearm. That's the first charge that is plea bargained away. The justice system doesn't take it seriously. We don't have strong enough laws against it. There was a time in this country where a lot of criminals chose not to use firearms in crimes. Why? Because the sentence that would accompany that was just not worth it. Use a gun, you're doing 10 more years on top of the first sentence. A violent assault, okay, we're going to give you 10 years for that. Violent assault with a firearm, okay, you get another on top of that. So when you're young and dumb and you think you're going to live forever and you're not going to get caught, and you know that the courts and the legal system and governments like the present NDP government of British Columbia treat this like a joke, why not get a gun?
The assets that are in play with criminal syndication in Canada, organized crime, are much bigger than they were before. Like, the big gangs, the bigger criminal gangs that used to operate in Canada had nowhere near the assets that the gangs that are operating in Canada do now. And I think that there's a lot of, that's this brinksmanship and this sort of arms race that's going on in the criminal world that, they do need them because they have a lot of stuff that they need to protect from both law enforcement, but also other gangs that this is what they do. They want to take each other out. So I think it's and all this stuff, it's just so frustrating to see someone stand up and lie about this stuff with the understanding that what he is lying about is directly contributing to these issues ongoing. Because until we do something about the ports, and we do something about the border, and we do increase our amount of law enforcement officers in Canada, and we do start sentencing people for more reasonable amounts of time for the crimes they're doing, this is just a distraction, an expensive distraction that, I keep saying it, we have very real issues in BC that need our money and funding and attention way more than this, because newsflash, people that aren't criminals having guns that they are licensed to own is not a problem. It shouldn't be a problem for the government. It shouldn't be a problem for the police. It should be something that is just accepted as, well, that's what you do, and so be it. You follow the law. Okay.
Closing, I think we should probably say, David Eby there, he said that, John Rustad is going to be importing American-style gun law and lawlessness to Canada. And really, I think what we can say is David Eby is importing vitriolic American-style politics to Canada. And I think that's That's at the end of the day. What we have to say here is legal law-abiding firearms owners do not have a candidate in David Eby. He's not an option. Do not vote for him. If you value your property in any way, shape, or form, do not vote for him. Caliber Magazine, Canadian magazine, Calibre. You can find them on social media here at all these places. Check them out for sure. Definitely are one of our favorite freedom fighters from BC. And on that note, I think we say goodnight. Make the right decision in the upcoming election. Thank you very much, gents.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of NFA Talk. Like and follow the NFA on social media and sign up to become a member.